Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Porterville Area Development Authority to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Tribe ex officio member William Garfield. Tribe member Gary Santos. Here. City ex officio member John Lawless.
Present.
City member Baldo Rodriguez. City member Milt Stowe. Here. Secretary Raylene Clower. Here. And Chair Monty Reyes.
Here. Thank you. At this time, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll go ahead and lead that. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May be seated. And this is the time for oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the Porterville Area Development Authority on any scheduled matter. Unless additional time is authorized, all commentary shall be limited to 3 minutes per individual and no more than 15 minutes total. Is there anyone, I don't see anyone in the chamber. Is there anyone on Zoom?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. We can move on to scheduled matters.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are 5 items before the authority this afternoon. And first of all, thank you very much for your valuable time and participation in today's meeting. The first and primary reason for today's meeting was the scheduling to consider, well, first, I apologize. Important housekeeping note on your first item is consideration of a resolution adopting procedures consistent with AB 361 and the Ralph M. Brown Act. As was presented to the authority at its last meeting, there has been legislation, AB 361, that allows for virtual participation of members of this authority. And it's the opportunity by adoption of a resolution is for the next 30 days. And so with passage of the proposed draft resolution would allow for such meetings to be continue to be conducted until November 20th. So it'd be the recommendation that the board give approval to the draft resolution provided.
Okay, thank you. And so this item, as stated, merely continues our ability to have virtual participation. So at this point, unless there's any questions, I'll entertain a motion. If there's any questions for staff, they're also present, but I think he summed it up pretty well. And this is one, we did approve this at the last meeting. This is just a continuation, correct?
Correct. So the current authorization would extend until October 31st because it was adopted on October 1st. So this would provide until November 20th, that authority.
Okay, great. And November 20th. So keeping that in mind, our meeting, next meeting has to be prior to that date.
Would be preferred.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Before we second the motion, is this going to move our monthly meeting to the 3rd Friday? We're going to have that etched in the bylaws?
I believe, I know we have to pick a time that's going to be in the bylaws that we have to notice the meetings for, and just as a matter of protocol within the bylaws. So, yeah, I believe there'll be every attempt to have this ratified before the 30 days, we can comply with the 30 days so that we don't have to have a special meeting to do that. And also, as long as we do this, we don't have to have a physical quorum, so that there's some times when remote participation needs to happen, we'd be able to do that. But it appears that would be, unless, when we get to the bylaws, I think we could suggest another date, because there's a future item on the agenda.
same thing, when, Ben didn't get, we had to create a rule to allow us to Zoom as well.
Okay, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Item number one. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So unless there's any other questions, we can go ahead and have the roll call vote.
Board Member Santos? Board Member Stowe? Secretary Clower? Chair Reyes?
Aye. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Next item, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. And what I meant to lead off with is saying, especially, I appreciate the time and participation today. And primary reason for meeting today was to consider proposed bylaws for the Porterville Area Development Authority. There were a number of considerations and asked for legal counsel to provide draft bylaws consistent with some of the directions on behalf of the board. And some of those specifically were having a regular meeting schedule, and it was indicated that meeting as to being the second Friday of each month at 3 p.m., that the meetings be scheduled at both city and tribe locations as determined by the authority, that the terms of both city and tribe representatives to the board be as appointed by their respective agencies, so there'd be no established terms. It would be as determined by the respective agencies. And that meeting agendas would be posted at City Hall not less or no less than 72 hours prior to regular meetings in conformance with the Brown Act. And again, those are regular meetings. And I guess that's a connection back to having a regular meeting schedule, is that by having a regular meeting schedule, it allows for the scheduling of special meetings that require only a 24-hour notice. But that such noticing would still occur at City Hall, which would serve as the I guess, Julia, here would be a little bit, if there is another location, so City Hall would be a consistent location, but if there would be another location, let's say at the Tribal Council chambers, that would be noticed there as well. Would that be consistent, Julia? So where, consistent with Brown Act, the location where the actual meeting happened would also need to be noticed? So.
Right. So the way I've got it worded here, I did pick one, at least a principal office, and I use the cities just because since the staff, it's being staffed and everything else, the JPA is by city, it just makes it just seem like the logical thing to do. But I also put in there that you could, from time to time, the board can designate a different location, and that would allow it to be at the tribe or frankly other places too. So I thought that would probably suffice, but like I said, this is a draft, so, the authority can certainly make changes or determine what it wants to do here.
But under the Brown Act, if this body were to meet in tribal chambers, as an example, would it need to be noticed at that location that this is where this board would be?
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Mhm.
we would
Yeah,
need to-
every time we notice it, the Brown Act requires time, location, so it would need to be noticed up there as well. And we would need to allow the public to attend up there if we are in fact doing it as a hybrid meeting where we're allowing people to attend at the physical location.
Okay. In that board members requested, if they wish to request items to be added to the meeting agenda, that there be prior communication with the city's ex officio member, being myself, for that. And also that kind of as an overriding philosophy, that there be avoid us versus them policies and to the extent of promoting collaboration between the agencies. So City Attorney Liu prepared the draft bylaws for the board's consideration, trying to incorporate those directions and in conformance with the MOU that formed PATA. So I guess that provides an introduction to that, and happy to answer any questions, provide further feedback. Again, these are, I would say, kind of the first pass, and happy to answer any questions. I know Julia is as well, as having prepared them.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm not sure how deeply we've had a chance to look at these, but I know I looked at the documents. I know that there's the one, there's some terminology in terms of president versus chairman. There's also the addition of a vice president in the bylaws. So, but at this point, if there's any questions anybody has specifically, we can start working on edits if we need to, or however we can, because it's good to have these sets so that we can conduct business.
If we're going over this first page right here, number 1, like Gary was talking about, I know I did mention the second Friday of each month, but going back and doing everything that we did this prior month, I think everybody would agree that the third Friday is better if that works for you guys. So, if possible, I know everyone's schedule is.
Fridays are usually a little better for me in general.
You want to propose a different time? No.
Does that, is that, does that conflict with any notable staff?
Fridays at 3 o'clock?
The third Friday of the month rather than the second?
Only, so you don't have any golf players, so that was the longstanding joke that 3 o'clock, it used to be, you can't find anybody at 3 o'clock at City Hall. So they've all retired. The, so no, we can make, there's no conflicts that I would be aware of.
And I think in just looking ahead, that doesn't really conflict with any of the, if there's holiday or anything coming up within the next few months, it doesn't look like it conflicts with that. So, and my schedule on that day is open. And I didn't count the actual days, but does that put us in 30-day range for, what do we have this month?
That'd be perfect.
Perfect? It would just be the exact, okay. So it
It would go
wouldn't
till
jeopardize
November.
our 30-day
November
window.
20th, yeah, be within the 30 days. Julia has indicated to me she can't hear some of the conversation because the mic, so when you're, turn them on, yeah.
Try
She can't-
yours and see if we have feedback.
So our audio is
Testing.
running through our system.
Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, sounds good, Julia.
Thank you.
Mr. Santos, will you try your microphone and see if it works?
Can you hear me, Julia?
Yes, now I can too. Thank you.
It wasn't on. Mine wasn't on.
Uh-huh.
Turn yours on.
Chairman Garfield was making it. The overdrive pedal is on. Okay, and then, I'm not, did you want to just do a
Sure.
quick test on yours if you're going to
All right,
address?
can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Following the last week's meeting, we discussed it with Hill, and thinking back to my former life as a public works contractor, the third Friday, at worst case scenario, would be the 21st or the 20th of the month. So that should leave you time to cut the check, as it were, and then also leave time for any revisions so that when you are reviewing it that third Friday, it's the final reviewed draft.
Okay, so technically then that date also works for the technical aspects? Okay,
Correct.
great. Okay, so, and right now we're just making notes for changes to the draft, okay? Great. Were there any other discussion points?
Yeah, on number 5, I thought we had discussed in the previous meeting that we were going to have those agenda items sent to John and Chairman Garfield. The agenda request items.
Okay.
I thought it was gonna be both to add to the agenda.
I think,
That's the way I understood it.
I think we did mention that, and I think, and if those requests are there, I think that just as a matter of courtesy, I wouldn't object to that. Does that pose any Brown Act or?
No,
It's closed.
to both, is it to both ex officio members we're talking about?
Yes,
Yes,
Oh, no, that shouldn't be a problem, I don't think.
okay.
okay, great.
Let the record reflect that member Rodriguez has arrived at 3:21.
If I remember correctly,
But do you strongly-
that particular member is a golfer.
Item 2.
Let me just change it. It's gonna be the third Friday of each
Okay.
month.
Are there any other discussion points for the bylaws?
Yes. For the tribe, what we'd like to see is, add language for non-waiver of sovereign immunity. We don't want the board binding the tribe, on some sovereign immunity stuff that may come about.
Is, okay, and I know in the agreement for the JPA, is there already language in the JPA language about state it again,
The tribe's,
Sovereign immunity.
sovereign immunity, yes.
and a waiver of that within the actions?
Yeah, so typically, we like to include some non-waiver language, Julie, and I can send it over to you, just saying
Yeah.
that the fact that we're participating in this isn't a waiver of our sovereign immunity. But I can send it over to you to take a look
Yeah,
at.
that's fine.
And then, indemnification and insurance provisions, I know you guys are probably all protected, but, wanting to make sure that the tribe as participants would, have similar protections.
Typically, we wouldn't put that in the bylaws. It should be an agreement, isn't it?
I believe it is listed in there, but I think it would be agreeable to review that document and see if it's within there and if it's legally supersedes what would be in the bylaws. But if there's any language that adds comfort
Yep.
to the bylaws, then I'm agreeable as if the rest of the board would be.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we have a few other concerns, but maybe we can have the legal counsel work those out, I guess.
What are those?
The
Chairman.
provision for the conflict of interest of board members, code of conduct, violations and other provisions.
What page is that?
Or it'd be additions, or let me see.
Conflict of interest?
There is no provision for conflict of interest.
Okay.
I couldn't hear what
Yeah,
that,
provisions for conflict of interest.
oh, okay, so conflict of interest is something that, we have to follow the law. Carrie and I had a brief discussion about this. But normally, if we're gonna do conflict, again, we could adopt a separate policy. You don't typically see extensive conflict of interest provisions in the bylaws, but if you guys wanna do that, we can. Because the law with regard to California public officials is gonna apply to JPA just like it applies to the city council.
I-
So,
I'm glad
Sounds
Julia, would the members of the board be subject to Form 700 filings?
yes, I think so.
So we need to do that as part of taking office. Okay.
Yep.
Form 700 is?
It's
Good point.
the FPPC, which regulates political practices
Right.
in the state, requires a disclosure form, but in specific regarding this, the initiation of being in office and the date you enter office, and then there's an annual reporting on basic financial interests, and those also illustrate potential conflicts of interest. So it
Right,
would-
we'll need to do a local conflict of interest code. So again, it's not part of the bylaws because it's actually required to be separate, but the city has one, so we can use that as sort of a template.
So actually, this probably gets to some good training that can be provided in what that looks like. This is something that that talks about where you're going to, all property that you have interest in, whether it be owned or rented, all gifts exceeding $25, not to exceed 500. I mean, there's a whole bunch
I think
of.
it's actually exceeding 50 now, but
Or is
yeah.
it okay, good. Woo, now you can get it.
All of
Couple cups of
that-
coffee now.
Report any gift once your gifts cumulatively exceed $50 from any source. There's exceptions to that, but yeah.
In regards to ours, somebody made the comment, you can't get a good steak for $50.
Might get theater ticket for 2.
Secretary Clower, did you have a comment?
Is that all as it relates to this JPA only?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and also there was you mentioned a code of conduct as well, Chairman Garfield.
Yeah, number 3 was no code of conduct or prohibited acts or violation provisions. Those are the notes that I have.
Okay, and that could also be a separate, maybe a
Yeah.
separate agreement that we each sign individually and submit.
And we have samples here and there of pretty much all of these things, so we can put those together. Again, start those. Then you guys can comment at a subsequent meeting.
Okay,
And then also, in section B, there, it talks about voting members must be present for a quorum, but there's nothing that states what happens if there's no quorum for a lengthy period of time.
So under the Brown Act, if you lose your quorum, the meeting's over the minute you lose the quorum. Under state law.
Okay, and what happens if this goes on for a couple of months and we don't,
Well,
We're
then
not
we
able
can,
to.
we can vote that person out and
Okay.
add someone else. on.
Right, so the nice thing is because of the flexibility you guys are affording both entities to appoint, then you would just appoint someone. If someone's not making it, then you have the ability to unseat that person and put somebody else in the seat if you need to.
and the ability to initiate that would be similar to sending new agenda items to the ex officio members. Okay,
okay, to put it on the agenda to say that we need
Correct.
to do this? Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you for clearing that up.
okay. And of course, the recommendation of a vice president, I think, is important in case at one point the president isn't able to conduct the meeting, so having that be in place is also important.
And then that goes down to one of our other notes, can the board conduct business not included in the agenda, posted 72 hours prior? So if there's nothing, if we didn't post it on the agenda 72 hours, can we bring up something and act on it?
I think there's,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Monty.
I
Sorry.
was gonna say, unless it's an emergency item, I didn't think that would necessarily be possible.
Right, so under the Brown Act, if you, we are absolutely, the general rule is that we absolutely must put something, you can't act on anything that's not on the agenda, and the agendas have to be posted within the allowed time periods. So for regular meetings, that's 72 hours. For special meetings, once we've adopted a regular meeting schedule, that gives us the ability to do the special meetings. which only require 24-hour notice. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility there. So we can do a shortened meeting if we need to on a specific item that comes up. But there is also a provision in the Brown Act that allows for an exemption for what they call urgent matters. But under the law, you have to meet the requirements in order to add an urgency item. And the rule on that is the item has to have not been, the JPA must have not been aware of the issue at the time it posted 72 hours in advance. So it came to the JP's attention after that 72-hour period, so you can't meet the requirements, yet there's an immediate need to take action on an item and it can't wait till the next regular meeting. So if we can meet those requirements, then we can add urgency items, but what generally speaking, public agencies really try to limit use of that, and really truly, follow the rules on it. Otherwise it gets pretty easy to start trying to justify stuff. And then all of a sudden we're not in compliance with the law anymore, or the spirit or the intent of it. So.
Do you think we could have some standing items then on the agenda, like processing of invoices and things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's exactly a good point. So with regular meetings, you typically try to have, your items, get them on as, and so you can, yes, when it comes to paying things though, generally speaking, you need to, the agenda is required to have the amounts. So we have to be, or at least have ranges so that we're able to at least, maximum ranges. So we need to be aware of that. But the nice thing is with the special meeting ability, that'll help. So if we need to enact, because that gives us a much shorter time frame within which we have to notice something, but it also could be in additional meetings other than our regular meetings. So.
Okay.
And just to
It'll
clarify,
force us all to be organized.
and as long as we have the ability to meet virtually, they can happen on Zoom with a quorum of voting members,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
As long as we're keeping current with our I love it, all these regulations. So as long as we're keeping current with that AB 361 stuff and we keep adopting that resolution, acknowledging the current emergency we're in, then yes, we can keep meeting on Zoom if we need to.
Okay. Member Rodriguez or Member Stowe, any comments or questions?
On any particular section or just in the bylaws of any section?
Just the bylaws of
On
any
any
section.
section in the bylaw?
Yeah, or even clarification just on big chunks, whether you see something not included in,
No,
or,
it's just that section C is, it talks about, removal, is it section B?
Yeah.
No, it's section,
D,
Hey, Baldo, can you turn your mic on?
D6. There, no, now you
One more
just turned it
time.
off. Hit it again. There you go.
okay. In section D, it talks about the removal. I'm assuming that
D6.
someone is being considered for removal has a vote in that? Is that correct?
Well, actually, it really is they serve at the pleasure of each of the respective parties. So, I mean, it's, if the city council wants to provide that voice to that member, they can, but and just as the tribe can, so.
Well, I'm assuming that this is the board, and the board is the ones that have the authority to remove an officer. And so if this board is it, and he's not a voting member, then you have to have 3 of the 4 who are voting members. A simple majority is what it takes, right, to remove?
Right,
Okay.
right.
I-
Although that can change, so, you have the ability to talk about that.
And we have 5 voting members, so I imagine they could vote for themselves or against themselves or whatever. if
I think this is speaking to the 5 and the 3.
Right.
Oh, you're right. So
Three
the city
officers.
council appoints its 3, the tribe appoints its 2. And they all serve so the 3 that are appointed by the city serve at the pleasure of the city council. The 2 that are appointed by the tribe serve at the pleasure of the tribe. Your ex officio members are actually designated in here. And you'd have to actually change the bylaws to change the ex officio members, right? That's how we currently have it listed.
Joe, I read the section
I'm looking at
of
the same
dealing
one.
with the officers, which
Turn it
are
on.
the president, the vice president, and the secretary as proposed.
Oh, yeah, well, hold on here.
Because it says officers, which the officers are the,
Julia,
Oh, I'm
he's,
looking
I
at
think we're looking at
D1.
two
Hold
different
on.
yeah, he's talking about D6, section D.
Oh, sorry, okay, D6, I'm
Item
sorry, I'm looking
6.
at D1. Oh, but yeah, the officers are, it's a majority makes the determination, Waldo.
Okay, and if we want to remove
On the
Baldo,
officers.
he can vote, he can vote in that, take part in that,
Yep.
voting.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
you do have a voice to that. So I'm sorry, I was thinking you're talking about the directors, but yes.
But I think that's a good point. I mean, and in the spirit of number 6 on the highlights, I mean, the avoiding us versus them policies, I don't know that it would be more of a discussion about attendance that would maybe prompt a recommendation to the other party about attendance with somebody who's on there. But with the officers, that's almost like a initiation of reorganization to remove an officer, because it states officers. So that would be the above the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer alone.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the treasurer is by definition the city finance director, so that.
Right, it's just the president, the vice president, and the secretary.
Okay.
So it says remove an officer. Can we put remove an officer or a member of the board instead of officer, or is?
No, because again, the city council and the
Oh, that's right.
JPA itself doesn't do that. It's the respective parties that do that with regard to the actual directors.
Which,
So-
yeah,
So the council could remove us 3, and the tribe can
Yes.
remove those, okay.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
and I
Yeah.
think an added agenda item discussing the attendance or code of conduct or something like that would prompt that discussion on either side without making a decision for the other side. That would be probably the technical way that would go about. Otherwise, there would just, I see in an instance where somebody just wasn't showing up, there may be, even in that case, I guess either side would have to take action independently, so.
Right, and here's an area where you guys absolutely can, I mean, you don't have to live with this language. This is just what I put in. So, as a starting point for discussion, so if you guys want to put in grounds or examples or, you know, not have that be so, because right now it is very discretionary, right? It's just the officers are serving at the pleasure of this JPA board. So, you know, if that's a concern to you, you guys can certainly look at adding cause in or adding examples of when, or even adding a time frame so that you regularly, if you want to add, so that you regularly consider reorganization.
Well-
I wasn't sure what you wanted there, so I kept it just very, you know, anytime you want, but that's not, you don't have to live with that.
Just for, so that I'm clear as to, because when I brought this up, I'm assuming that when I read initially the officers, they're talking about the officers that were elected by this board, the president,
Right.
vice president, and
Right.
treasurer.
Yeah,
And then the concern I had is if it simply takes a simple majority, and the city's got 3 members, and the tribe has 2 members, the city has the majority, right? And it seemed to me that's a little bit, it seemed a little bit odd that under the very, very worst scenarios, these 3 members would say, we don't like this gentleman, and we want him out. And that just doesn't seem very fair. It didn't make sense to me, to be honest with you.
Well, I may not like you and vote against you, so.
Yeah, but I know you wouldn't.
Well, the way to address that would be a supermajority, so instead of what do you call that?
four-fifth,
A
Yeah,
four-fifths
okay.
vote of the- a
That
four-fifths
makes more
vote of the
sense to
board.
me.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me.
Probably want to add, with cause too, so that it's not just, you know, just discretionary as suggested.
And I agree with, sorry, Councilmember Stowe, please.
I was gonna say, we probably should also add that this board would make a recommendation to either council to remove a member if we don't think that that member is appropriate or is doing his job.
so I could put something in to the effect of the board of directors may remove an officer at any time with a 4/5 vote with reasonable cause or something,
makes
something
sense,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's reasonable. Okay, that was it.
Is it gonna be removed or recommendation to be removed?
Well, this is for officers, for the.
This is just officers. The JPA does not control the members.
So
For a member, it has to come from the council,
Mm-hmm.
or, well, either council, tribal council or the city council.
Okay.
But there was a question raised actually to, I call it reorganization. Should the organization of officers be reviewed on some
Well, every
You
2
guys could
years?
always put in you know,
Annually.
an opportunity to reorganize annually, or, you know, if you want it, or even, or longer. I think how long, hopefully this is, annually is good, but
I would say that annually. be-
annually,
Yes. To reorganize if that's.
we would probably want to set when then, like what month?
When did we start?
Started in October.
September?
October?
October?
September? So in September, you know, first meeting in September?
Or,
Yeah, the regular meeting. in
or is there
September.
any other fiscal calendar that would,
So we say that that we follow a fiscal year, July 1, June 30, in here as
Oh, okay.
defining the fiscal year for this, for the intent of this body, or the authority.
Oh, that would make sense. You could tie it to your fiscal year.
That's your guys' fiscal year, July 1 to June 30th?
It's what's proposed in the bylaws to apply to the authority.
and then also when do the terms for tribal council members typically start?
January 18th of the year.
And then,
It's the third Saturday of the month.
and then for the city, it's late December.
Around the 1st of December, it depends on the
Okay.
county.
I'm just
I
wondering
would
if,
say safely by the second meeting of December, usually we have the new council seated.
okay. So that would be my question, whether it's more appropriate to have it match the fiscal year or the calendar year, or the elected official start date, as there may be vacancies due to people leaving office, if they're in office.
So that may make, if there are changes to that, so you'd have
For
December and
February?
January, so that would almost speak to February, the February meeting of reorganization.
The third Friday that month?
Right, of
The,
February.
the regular February meeting is we could put in here.
Okay.
Ours are covered by.
Do we
title.
have to have a set date or when, or can we put when it's necessary or when a member, a sitting member leaves the board? We can look at reorganization then, or,
Yeah, the only problem you're gonna have is you're gonna have staggered change, right? You're gonna have
Yeah,
new council members start in December, January, and you're gonna have new tribal council members start probably in January, February.
exactly.
So then you'd end up with kind of, it may be a little bit in flux there during that period.
But seeing that's the point I'm trying to make, if, okay, Monty's in now and then the tribal council have their meeting, they have 2 more people, and they may not want him in and they want to so
Right.
I don't know, you know, it's,
That's true, and and there needs to be time for each council to take action upon appointment, which is even more lead time.
so do you want to like do February? Would that be more appropriate, or?
I think if you're gonna do a regular, you have a standard annual, that makes sense to make it in February, because I think everybody should be seated, right, from their
Right.
respective elections by then.
Exactly. Yes.
There may be, we just are gonna have to know that it may make your December and January meetings a little bit interesting, because you may have, for instance, the new members from the city council may have already come in, and so it's possible somebody, you know, there may be some temporary needing to utilize temporary officers during those times for the purposes of running the meeting until you have your final members seated
All
from
right.
each party.
That makes sense.
And,
Yeah.
and then are the provisions for changing the bylaws, since they're typically a living, breathing document as things move on, are those in here? Or just, sorry, I've kind of,
Let me see, they should be. Let me see if I've got it in here.
Chairman, probably mid-February would be good for us too, because normally what happens is we get on elections, that third Saturday of the month, and then, you know, we take a couple weeks for, onboarding, And then then we probably have our first meeting probably late February, early March, and start appointing officials to boards and all that.
And you think February timeframe would allow enough time for the seating and the choice of committees and, okay,
Yeah.
good.
So we're good on that.
And back to the question on amendment of bylaws, it's in section C7 on page 2. Right now,
Oh,
it
there it
provides
is.
for amending the bylaws by majority vote of the
Okay.
entire voting membership of the JPA board. So
Okay.
now that can change. I've seen 4/5 on that. If that's something that the
Well,
that the
Yeah.
Joint Powers Authority is interested in.
I
Or-
think that
or
probably should
unanimous.
be, pardon me, John? I'm
Or
sorry.
unanimous.
I
Or
was go- I
unanimous.
was gonna say, yeah, 4/5 or unanimous. I think at least 4/5. You know, I wouldn't want one group to have more power over another. group, you know.
Unanimous ends up giving everybody veto power, right?
Yeah.
So,
There's another authority that was recently formed that has adoption of budget has to be unanimous.
oh, wow.
TCRTA.
Did they? Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yeah, that's right.
Made sure that there was no winners and losers in budget adoption.
TCRT
Yeah.
has unanimous vote for budget. So
That helped some of the questions, clear up some of the questions that we had on that.
So did we decide we wanted to go with majority or 4/5 on the, or unanimous on the bylaws?
Well, I would like at least 4/5.
is there a
Yeah.
4/5?
Mhm.
I think the consensus is 4/5.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate you bringing that up. I didn't, yeah.
What's gonna require a resolution?
For which, in the context of,
I'm just asking.
oh, for,
For decisions, it's like, you know, is it gonna be a dollar amount or, I don't know.
a threshold for,
Threshold for a resolution.
You're gonna have to speak into your mic, I think.
I think
there.
his mic has got a problem. I mean, he might have to use
Is
Mr.
there
Sen.
gonna be a threshold for, a resolution, maybe on?
There's not currently one in here, so right now that the JPA could act via resolution, minute order. It doesn't have to do anything via resolution, but if the authority would like that, we certainly can put something in.
I think that question kind of speaks a little bit to the question that was, I wrote down a question, kind of just to, I think talked about how the agenda is formatted when it talked about, I think Ms. Patterson talked about the, standing items on the agenda. So from I guess that goes to agenda prep, which is what is the format of the agenda, what is, if all actions are approved by resolution if they exceed expenditures of X dollars. I'm going to defer to Fernando a little bit about, because when we do our agenda prep, I defer to the clerks. They're the ones that kind of would speak to order and what is required. And that's just our as it applies to the city, but
Not entirely, that would have to defer to
Patrice,
Julie on
yeah.
this one, 'cause
I don't think there's a requirement, like a legal requirement. So it's just a matter of what your comfort level is. We do budget appropriations all the time. We do, make decisions to award contracts and spend money without resolutions all the time as a city council. So, but if there's a concern there, we can certainly make it more, resolutions a more formalized way to do that. So. Sometimes I like resolutions when policies are officially adopted. For record keeping, it's nice. When you're needing to track things, resolutions are nice because they become part of your permanent record, and it's easy, and they're numbered, and so then you can go find them when you need them.
It's a good question because as there is state funding sometimes involved, they require resolutions for funds. So
Right. We'll do them when we're told we need to do them. That's what that's all about.
Right.
I would think for audit purposes, your minutes and your resolutions would probably be the easiest way to keep it clean. And then that way when there's no review of the entire process, I guess, or every decision that needs to be made, it's just, they'll probably review resolutions that, on major decisions.
Yeah, it seems like a resolution on major decisions is probably appropriate just for,
Contracts, huh?
yeah. Okay. Any other discussion points? Or elaboration on any that we've already touched on? I think we did touch on the big ones, which especially how to amend the bylaws, which, starting out, we'll probably see at least one of those in the coming months. I would presume, with something, but maybe not, but they can be changed. So as long as we're clear on the process, I think we can get started with another draft with these amendments. And
I know, John, you had mentioned needing more than a majority vote on the operating budget. So that's another thing that can be addressed in this, if that is the authority's recommendation. That's at section F1.
One more question. Is, like in regards to the annual audit, contracting with a certified public accountant, should both entities put a little money in the pot for that, or how's that gonna be determined?
so there'll be, that's a good question. And so there'll be an operating budget for the JPA at some point, but how those expenses are determined, I think would be a good question.
If I can ask the treasurer. Yeah, you get to speak.
Right now, really, I don't know where funds are going to be coming from, if there's any contribution from the city and the tribe to start this JPA. All I know right now is the project funds for the construction of the tertiary treatment plant. So it's a decision that the board has to make where the funds are going to be coming from for operating expenses.
Okay, so that could be done with a call for funds at some point throughout the year or quarterly or something, depending on what's aside from the project funds, other needs to keep the JPA operational.
Okay, when we're talking about budgets, where's that money coming from to have a budget?
Yeah, that,
I had another, so I had a question.
That's-
So, I have a question for the treasurer. So as city funds, use the wastewater treatment facility which is funded by the city, it's going to be subject to city audit of our funds. So,
I imagine the construction project, the funds for the project will be part of the annual city audit.
and that's the question I was trying to get to, which is, because we could, would you call it a special audit? Is that what you would call it? So amending so we have an audit agreement which we're required to have. If it expanded to the authority, given that the city's a primary financier of it.
Yeah, we could, if the authority can, of course, do a separate audit just for the authority.
'Cause I think that's what's being spoken to here, correct, Julia, is that there would be an audit of the PADA, but largely the city's the financier of PADA, so would there be additional audit work beyond what is already under the auditing services of the city?
It may be, we would need to talk to our service provider and see if it's gonna be additional, because it does need to still, it's still an independent authority, even albeit one that is being, staffed and the funds are essentially maintained for safekeeping via the city. I just don't know. I don't know what they're gonna, I would imagine there will be a little bit of an additional expense with that, but that their auditor probably can do it.
Well, and I guess my question to the treasurer is which is better, to have a separate audit? So if the city's finances are already under audit, would it be better to have an independent auditor of that auditor reviewing PADA, or to have the same?
Really up to the authority.
I think, here's what I think. I think we probably ought to ask the auditor, because they're gonna know, they'll have a comfort level. They'll know whether they want to do it or not, or whether they think it should be separate under their own sort of ethical guidelines.
I would think if there are other funds that are still that it should be a separate, a special audit just for the authorities. If it's just the construction funds, then probably not. But if there are other funds that would belong to the authority, it would be a special audit. Yep.
You'd be good to get an opinion.
Yeah. So we'll find out details from the auditor and see the comfort level and what we need to comply with as far as an audit, and then we can always take it a step further if other funds do come into play that we need to have a separate audit.
I don't think it'll affect the wording of the bylaws. We just need to figure out practically how this is gonna work.
Does that answer your question? Good? Okay.
Yeah, actually, so does the tribe engage audit? Does the tribe engage audit services of its?
Yeah, we do audits every year as well. And I know they can be quite expensive, so.
Yeah, but.
And I don't know what level of audit, section 6505 is. Familiar with that, so.
It's very intense and inclusive.
Any other questions on any topics or sections?
I think we're good. 'Cause I think they're answered.
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay. And then any additional questions, Member Stowe or Member Rodriguez?
Not for me.
Okay, and so we're just looking for direction on potential amendments for the bylaws at this point, is that correct? Okay. And then, once the bylaws are acted upon, then is that when we decide on the additional officer that's listed in there, or does that action take place prior to ratifying the bylaws?
Good question. Let's see, what do we have on the agenda today? I don't think we put appointment of officers on, right? Yeah, I would say we can hold off on that for now, and then we can simply, once the secretary can sign off on after being appointed. Because really the secretary just they'll sign off on minutes and approval bylaws, much like what our secretaries do for the city council. And we have staff that'll serve in actually taking the minutes and helping prepare, doing the legwork on that information, so.
And so as a, I guess, a matter of procedure, then the secretary would run the meeting if the president weren't present.
Because we don't have a
until-
vice president right now. Oh, that's right. That's
Correct.
actually the vice president that we don't have. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's right. That's true. Or what you can do under general parliamentary procedure is if you do not have your presiding officer, then the group can just pick another presiding officer in their absence. So
Okay.
that's how you handle it without having when you don't have somebody actually appointed to that position.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so if there's no other questions, then we can go ahead and move on to the next item.
Yeah, so I would say between Julie and myself and perhaps Raylene, we can make sure we captured all of that.
And Carrie's going
And
to send
Carrie.
us the sovereign
Okay.
language.
So
Sounds
there'll
good.
be some sausage making in the next couple of weeks.
Great. So then that brings us to item 3.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know there was some, at the last meeting, as there was the award of bid, questions with regards to the status of the construction contract and wishing for its review. What's been presented to the board, at least was the last version that I saw, that I saw presented. I know there's been some modifications subsequently, I think, but I know there was a request to have what that construction contract looked like, so that's been provided as an exhibit, as well as confirmation of the, I would say, the award letter as issued by Tule River Tribe. So.
Don, I'll just add too that I did get today, I received an updated draft of the contract, but I have not had time to look at it yet. I just got it. So, and I do know that there's a substantial change in that the prior version referred to general conditions, and Hydroscience has its own general conditions. So it has eliminated the standard form ones and put those in. So I do need to review it for that. So I will do that. And I talked to Carrie actually right before the meeting about it. So I will do that, and I'll do that actually before I know I'm gone most of next week, but I'll do it before I leave. So, and get any comments to you guys so that we can get this moving along as quickly as possible.
Okay. Are there any questions on the contract presented?
Yeah, yes, I do. A couple of things. First of all, if I'm understanding this is basically a boilerplate that everything else will be filled in when Julia has an opportunity to review it, the specials and the contract documents as they were presented to the bidding contractors?
That's a work in progress right now. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I may, there's a couple of things here that it's not clear to me as to what's being, it says 355 calendar days. Is that just a placeholder? That doesn't really mean anything? Is that just a placeholder under section 3.331? Does anybody know?
Bolded areas in an AIA
3.331?
document.
3.31?
I don't even need to
Top
look
of
at it
page
anymore.
3.
So 355 days is the date from commencement to substantial completion.
Okay, calendar days including Sundays, and it's just a running calendar then at that point, not working days like we used to do them here.
I think that there is somewhere in this is the definition, and I believe it was calendar days, but I'll have to go back and check.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I do think it is calendar days.
Well, it says that.
Oh, there it is. It is in there.
It says
Okay.
355.
Thank you. It's
Calendar
right
days
there.
Right next to it.
Sometimes it's not. That's why it's
355.
usually it's
No,
just
it-
days and then it's defined somewhere else. But yeah, it's right
The
there.
calendars, and that includes Sunday, then it's just a running calendar from the minute it starts.
And-
Okay.
And I believe that
Correct.
has to do with an emphasis of ensuring completion by opening day, as an opening day activity.
And-
What is the date set for opening day? I'm sorry, Bo.
Okay, let's get something.
There's not a
Or
date,
estimate, or just,
mid-November of 2022.
Okay,
oh, all right,
That's what we're shooting for.
so they're gonna have to start real
Oh.
soon.
they're started.
That is the goal,
Okay,
That's why we need to get the contract approved.
right?
So
I'm looking
moving
at
that
the
date.
355, I'm like, I know Sean mentioned speeding them up a little bit on the schedule, so hopefully they don't hold us to 355 completely.
Yeah, I think there was concern about getting the information out, I think, for the RFP, was that the discussion?
For the detention basin,
For
yes,
the basin?
the environmental. Yeah, we need to ask that question too, when,
When it comes up.
yeah.
Will it come up later in this?
I don't know if it'll come up in this, because I didn't see it on the agenda, maybe in discussion? Oh, wait, hello?
And during other matters, I
matters,
think
yes.
we can bring up things that aren't agendized for future, or at least get the conversation started to be agendized.
Yeah.
They have to preside by, the regular contract, like DPO, DBO, and all that.
Another,
yeah, under the Article 4, Julie, under Article 4, if I'm reading and understanding the contract sum that correctly, the bid amount that was awarded to Clark Brothers is the cost of the project, and so I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm probably reading this incorrectly, but it goes into some detail as to that the amount that's been awarded is the contract amount, but then it gets into excluding grading and shoring. I'm a little bit concerned, or maybe I'm just confused about what they mean by that. And under the city, we used to do the same thing for public improvement and building permits. We cover the cost of building permits, but that excludes grading and shoring. I'm not sure what they mean by that. So can somebody just look into that?
Yeah, that's a good question for maybe the owner's rep.
Yes, just, what do they mean by that? Okay.
okay, so we'll get a little bit clearer definition on what that is,
What that means.
and make sure that it's not an anticipated additional cost.
I think our
He is on.
Hill International.
Oh, it's the
Yes,
permit for
the
grading and
permits,
shoring.
Sorry.
Only,
Okay, so it is included for the permit
Yeah,
itself.
including
Yeah.
grading,
Okay,
shoring,
good.
public
Then
improvement and
including
building permit.
permits,
That's how I would read, well,
excluding the
you know,
grading and
it's all about the
shoring. Yeah, okay,
comma there,
good.
comma.
Thank you.
We'll
Okay.
check the placement of the commas.
okay,
Could I chime in?
yes, please.
Yeah, that is kind of an overall statement that refers to permits. And that would include essentially a grading permit. That would include, any type of shoring or special permit requirements. And those are usually costs that are borne or carried back to the owners.
Right. Yeah, it was.
So that's not excluding the actual grading work.
Okay,
Right.
That would be commensurate with constructing the tertiary plant
yeah.
and the other improvements.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
clarification. Anything
It's
additional?
good to have you back, Waldo.
Okay, English is a second language. I'm sure it was written properly, but when I read it, it came across as that's gonna be an extra, so that's the only thing the reason I brought it back. Yes, I have something on, and I'm assuming that, Julia, these, numbers are being filled in, like, for example, it talks about the liquidated damages, and they give you nothing on liquidated damages. So I'm assuming that's gonna, if we go to that
It
section,
should,
the special,
yeah,
that'll
we'll
be
check
in there.
that. It should be.
Okay.
Anything additional?
Yes, under section 5.1.61.2, just some clarification on that. That's on page 5, the second entry, point 2. I want to know, I want to make sure I'm not reading this incorrectly. That says that portion of the contract sum properly allocable to materials and equipment delivered and suitably stored. What are we talking about?
Sorry, what line item are you on?
On page 5?
I was looking at-
5.1.6.1.
Okay.
Point 2.
Back to your question on
Yeah.
limited liquidated damages, this is consequential liquidated damages clause. So it doesn't specify a number, but it picks up the exact amount of owner's losses due to contractor's delay. So sometimes
So
we
it
call
doesn't give you a specific number.
Correct. So 5.1.1,
5.1.6.1.2.
Okay.
This clause would apply to deliveries of sub-assemblies, as an example. Let's just call it a pump that hasn't been fully installed yet, but it's been received on site, that the progress payment would compensate the contractor for that.
Oh.
This version, actually the most updated version, looks like you guys took that out and referred to part 7 of the specifications instead. Just as a heads up, this one area that looks like it got taken out.
Okay.
So again, this was the most recent version I have. I know it's been modified subsequent to what you've seen, but this, you had asked, so
Right.
here's the current, the most current version I had, but it continues to be modified.
Well, as I understand what was just stated, if the contractor delivers pumps, piping, or any assorted materials, and it's stored but not incorporated,
We're going to pay them.
then you're going to pay for it based on what? Based on what? And I don't think
Schedule of values.
the schedule of values has broken it down with the labor included to install, and it breaks it down, the cost of the materials itself?
Should, yes.
I've never seen that.
And in the current, the bid items, they were by, each element was like, was like a lump sum.
Right.
Traditionally, and I had an informal discussion with Clark Brothers yesterday. And, this would be easy enough to determine on a schedule, a schedule of values for payment if there are going to be materials, what those materials may be, and then what a suitable value for those might be as well. That we would know up front and get approval on before we proceed to actually, compensating the contractor for that work.
Okay.
Yeah, we're kind of at a handicap with the contractor right now because without a formal contract or an NTP, we can't necessarily ask them for the details of that type of a cost breakdown or a schedule quite yet.
But it will be
Isn't that-
forthcoming to that level of detail.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Is there additional concern or
Well,
additional question?
The concern is this, because I've been involved in this, where you have a lot of material that's been delivered, and it's gonna be incorporated sometime down the future, but it's there,
Right.
it's stored. And when you ask, why are those pumps there? They say, well, in about 2 or 3 months, we are gonna incorporate those. Yet the cost of those pumps gets shown on that progress payment immediately. Yet that work gets incorporated 3 months down the line. So the city of Porterville just didn't do that. You either incorporate the work, or you're storing it at your cost. Because we never got down to the level of detail where because the contract documents say it's gonna be, this is the amount to install those pumps, but you never get additional detail as to what the cost of those pumps were.
Right.
And so now at this point, you're basically saying, okay, how much did the pumps cost? And the contractor says,
Yeah.
$1 million.
And you raise an excellent question, and one of the easy ways to deal with that is, since we do have essentially bid items for that scope of work, we could easily compensate based on, receipts that are furnished by the suppliers for that work. So there's a lot of ways that we can quantify the actual cost of that material. So, this is something that, I know with the city staff, once those submittals come in, because these are administrative submittals, we'd like to, at least we're all on the same page with it so that we're managing this risk as a team moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, risk management on that would be important because as we've seen in other projects that
Right.
have materials around that sometimes
Right.
they end up,
They want to come in and they want to front load a project and, get a ton of money up front. And it's kind of it's an awkward way to approach a project, but we're sensitive to the contractor trying to do that. And I think we can establish some rules pretty quickly with them once we get a contract ratified.
yeah, and I think that there's got to be a balance because there's probably material acquisition or shortages that need to be talked. So in some cases it may benefit, but other cases the risk of having them either missing or damaged in storage or something like that could be.
Exactly.
Okay.
And on this particular project, some of the equipment is long lead. It is, it's unique. It's expensive in itself. And sometimes the providers are actually looking for deposits on this stuff. With COVID, the supply chain difficulties are becoming more acute. They're a very real issue that we have to collectively work with these contractors to mitigate, I want to say, the back end delivery of this project, because we do want this plant to go live. And we do want to ensure the success of the plant for the city and the tribe as well as for Clark Brothers. They're approaching this in good faith at this time as well, so.
Member Rodriguez, do you feel that when we see the updated version that we might either address this or see it?
No, I think all the arguments on both sides are very good. Again, my concern is, these are the concerns that I've been personally involved with when you have problems with the contractor may be going through problems that nobody else is even aware of. You're paying upfront for delivered materials, and that money is being used for other things. And you, all of a sudden, you're sitting on a bunch of material that you as a city staff can't do anything with, or tribal staff can't do anything with, because you don't have the means to incorporate that, but you bought that material. But anyway, so.
Yeah, points well taken.
And exactly, good to say it, and it's good that it's on record as being said.
In your bylaws, I don't mean to go backwards in an agenda, but you have the ability to form advisory committees of the board, or doesn't have to be members of the board, and it may be helpful in this level of scrutiny if the board wishes to form a subcommittee of itself to kind of get in the weeds, if you will, to city council regularly does that, has ad hocs or what have you. There may be an interest to not have a quorum, but have, say, 2 members of this board review this level of detail to make recommendations back to the board itself.
I'd like to propose maybe one of you guys as city project managers and also our owner's rep, Mr. Sean Benedict, be those point people. Because I'm pretty sure we're partners on this anyway. So your guys as project managers will collaborate with ours, and they can make the recommendations to the board.
Is it preferred to have a member from the JPA serve on the committee or represent the JPA's interest on the subcommittee, or would it be independent of board members?
Well, this was section C, item 2, says that one of the duties or powers of the board is to form any such advisory committees as deemed appropriate to assist with conducting the business of the authority. And that, so it's really the question, and I would say it's an important function of the authority to have these recommendations come, or to really whatever is most efficient to the board.
Do we want someone on the board or bringing people outside the board? That's up to
Or-
us.
This is the critical function of the board, so why delegate it to a subcommittee? So whichever is, I don't know.
Okay. But in that case, then I will second the motion. If we have someone that will be willing to do it.
Is that one of a board member with the the owner's rep and a staff member from the city? I think the
Well-
suggestion was a member of the owner's rep and then a project manager from the city.
Do we have a project manager?
It would probably come, I would say it would likely be Javier and
I was gonna say, yeah,
And Mr. Benedict.
engineer or something.
And so,
Mr. Knight.
There's a couple different ways you guys can approach this. So you could do an ad hoc committee consisting solely of 2 members of the JPA, right? And they don't have to notice meetings or anything. So it's just, you can have informal meetings with 2 members and then with staff helping. So that's one way to do it. Or you can do it completely at the staff level, which is what I think was suggested by Member Santos. So there's a couple different ways you can do this to make it where it's not like you're not having to get in a situation where you're noticing another meeting and all that good stuff.
yeah, it's really what does the board feel is most effective?
So just also wanted to note, I mean, staff is already currently reviewing these documents. It's a little bit out of sorts on the process. Generally, some of these documents are already reviewed and all these details are hashed out before we're at this point.
We
So-
haven't had a chance yet.
So we're actually working a little bit in reverse, and so I know Javier is reviewing the document. I'm in the process of reviewing the document. Some comments have been sent over, and just hearing now that there's an update to the document that now needs to be reviewed as well. So we're a little bit out of sorts on the process, and so staff is already actively reviewing it between the city attorney and engineering department and my department as well. So I think we just need to get a chance to look at an actual complete document with the changes that have been made, and then see where that ends up and review those comments collectively. And then we can move forward from there if that's what the board should choose.
Yeah, and also the reasoning behind my recommendation is, obviously, this is a huge project for the tribe and also the city. And the more we can bring the city involved, because there's going to be more involvement than more than just a tertiary plant. And if you guys are up to speed and the staff's up to speed, because we need a lot of input from your staff, that's only going to help the project and the board move forward in a timely manner, so.
okay, so just to clarify, if there's already under review from staff and then, and the tribe is also looking at it, do we need to form a subcommittee based on that, or should we look to form a subcommittee with a board member at a future date once we've seen the completed contract?
If I can, if I may.
Sure.
I don't think it's necessary to have an ad hoc committee if they're already looking at it.
Okay.
It's just, they've got everything that they're looking and they're checking just the stuff that Mr. Rodriguez just asked about, and they're scrutinizing, they're going through it, and so I don't think it's necessary to do it, to tell you the truth.
I agree.
Excuse me, that's just double work.
Okay, and so we had a motion and a second in that this discussion, so I'll ask Member Santos if it's, is it sufficient to go on as we're doing now until we get a complete contract, and then at some point, the board deem it to create an ad hoc committee with board representation at a later date? Would that suffice for your concerns? But just with direction, well, I guess with recommendation from this body that the reviewing continue as it has been in process, but should any need for additional board member participation or anything be requested from staff, then at that time, or at the time the contract is presented in its completion, that we form an ad hoc committee. Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
If it's necessary.
Yeah, question from
Are your
Chairman
ad hoc
Garfield.
committee members compensated?
No.
Nope, volunteer? Okay.
Or instructed to.
Okay, so since we have a motion and a second, do we need to withdraw that to continue, or do we just, no?
I don't
I think you're okay. I mean, well, you can just have your motion maker withdraw the motion and with the consent of your second.
Did he put it in the form of a motion or just?
He did.
Mine was a recommendation.
Oh, it just was a recommend, okay, I'm
Oh.
sorry.
Then, yeah, you're good.
Then I think that's sufficient, but hold that thought for future consideration. Are there any other points?
If I may, just really quickly, I got myself a little bit confused. The term project manager was thrown out, and it's my understanding that there is a formal project manager working for Hydroscience, or the gentleman that was here. We have a formal project manager.
Sean, I think, and Sean, the project.
Sean, right?
John Benedict's the owner's rep for the tribe.
Correct.
International.
But he is the project manager. There is no two project managers, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So the order that within the project team, Curtis Lamb, who is the senior engineer of record for Hydroscience,
Uh-huh.
is the engineer of record formally for the tertiary plant. He assumes the design responsibility, and we'll be reviewing all the submittals and the RFIs and supporting the project team from an engineering perspective. I'm taking over the administrative role as project manager,
Okay.
and will be processing the pay applications, ensuring that the inspection processes and other workflows are actually being adhered to. And then also working with, your all's Public Works Department.
Okay, got it.
So yes, that team is kind of establishing itself, and it's awaiting, a formal kickoff, which would then generate a formal kickoff meeting, and all the roles and responsibilities would be outlined at that time.
Thank you
But
very much.
that's the informal structure at this point.
That's clear now. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions on the contract?
Yes, is this a placeholder, the 5%? Isn't it customary the 10%, or is this something that's already been agreed on, that it would be 5%, the retainage?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe the 5% number was part of the GCs that were embedded in the bid documents themselves. I would have to go back and double check, but that's typically where those conditions are outlined.
Okay.
So the bidder's aware of it at the time of bidding.
All right.
Okay.
Although we'd be limited nowadays anyways on that too. The
Mhm.
laws changed on that.
Okay. Well, okay, thank you for bringing up the fact that I've been out of the loop.
He's back from the 10% days. I know what he's thinking.
He's not licensed to operate in California as an attorney, so he's lost that.
Okay.
Got any more?
Yeah, just the very last one, and this goes to our previous conversation with these, for delivered materials, and I apologize for beating a dead horse, but this last comment here on section 5.1.9, except with the owner's prior approval, the contractor does not make advance payments to suppliers for materials or equipment which have not been delivered. There's even a little bit more concerning. And I think it sort of ties in that there are some long lead items. And so do we
Correct.
anticipate making payments for these long lead items? Or is this something that it's the contractor's responsibility to do this?
No, this is actually a very good question. And I'm going to bring up something which doesn't necessarily apply to the tertiary plant, but I think everyone can appreciate the example. Every project I've ever been on that has an elevator requires a big deposit to actually initiate the procurement of the elevators. And that is the classic example of why this clause is typically embedded in contracts. You can't get anything out of an elevator provider without a sizable deposit. And those sometimes are 6 to 9 or sometimes 12 months in advance of the actual delivery and installation of the elevators. So just using elevator as an example. Now, I'd have to go through and comb through the actual equipment that's detailed on the plan itself. And I know we're starting those kind of informal discussions with Clark Brothers, but we are very curious about some of the long lead items and what the suppliers may or may not be asking for. Sometimes in this COVID environment, we're actually having to make deposits to actually get a firm fabrication date out of some of these suppliers so we don't jeopardize delivery of the projects. It's a little different today than it was, 2 years ago, before COVID. I mean, this supply chain interruption is a massive risk that we're all having to deal with right now.
Very good.
But what this clause is intended is the contractor has a responsibility to come to us before they presume to actually spend any money and then come to us in a pay app and say, oh, by the way, I put a deposit down on all this.
Makes sense, yes.
Well, they're proceeding at their risk at that point.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Good. Okay, and so we will have an updated contract at the next meeting. Okay, appreciate that. So we can move on to the next item. Did you have an, sorry, did you have?
I do have a concern that if we're not gonna look at it and review it for another month, it's going to put us further behind. Do you think it would be important, Sean, Zach, I know you're not completely on this one, 100%, to do it as soon as possible, review this contract and get it signed? Because we would like to start soon. I mean,
As soon as possible.
Michael.
Yeah, I would have to second what Raylene is suggesting. I think there is a degree of importance. The issuance of this particular contract in the NTP is pretty critical right now. I mean, the float that we have in the programmatic schedule for the initiation of this work, we are actually running out of float. This item and some issues with the detention basin are going to have a significant impact on the overall project, as well as some of the expectations that I think the panel has as far as the overall program delivery and some of the enabling projects surrounding the casino. So that said, I would stress the importance of fast tracking review and issuance of this contract. If that's a special meeting, that would be a special meeting if it's possible.
When do you think you will have the contract completed, or?
Well, I'm hoping to get it, I mean, I just got it today, the most recent version, and it is substantially different than the one that I looked at from before. But that being said, I'm not here Tuesday through the rest of the week, next week, so I'm trying to get it done before that. So I was planning on getting my comments by the end of Monday, out to, at least to staff and to Carrie.
If I may, the action of the board was to approve considering the legal review of the contract. So this
Okay.
authority already took action at your last meeting to approve with legal contract review for approval. So
That's the reason I asked
it's
Julie.
upon the satisfaction of legal counsel that the contract, so, and it's not uncommon that the board provide its authority based upon once the attorneys are happy.
And that's the reason my question was to Julia and Carrie, because I knew we had approved it, but when will they get that final
Right,
contract?
so I don't know that
We need a special.
I mean, certainly the board can,
That's good.
but
Can
your
we-
action from your last meeting was pending legal review of the contract.
And then can we add to that approval, Mr. Benedict and maybe Javier, one of you guys as staff members?
To look over, oh, you mean to?
Yeah.
I will definitely be involved with staff and my comment so that I'll have my initial comments. I don't know that I'll be able to speak for staff, but I'll be able to at least get that out. And if I have questions, I'll get those to staff as well. And I would imagine, in fact, I frankly have forwarded it to staff already. So they'll have access to it too.
So Javier would have looked at it and.
And Curtis and Sean will have it as well, so we won't give a thumbs up until everybody's comfortable on our end either.
Yeah,
So my anticipation would be that you would have in your next meeting a copy of the contract that was
Yeah, but
approved.
has been approved, right?
She was saying that you need it before the next meeting, correct?
Yeah, we need
To
them
get
to start
going.
before
Yeah.
that.
It- But
But
based
we're
on,
just gonna review a signed contract then, at the next meeting, yeah?
Yeah, it'll have already been executed because you don't need to wait. You don't need another approval from the JPA.
I would call the next time you see it would be an information item. Here's what got executed. This
Okay.
was a matter, because it was requested in this meeting that, because the contract wasn't presented, that the opportunity to review it. But again, what you're reviewing has already been modified.
Right.
So appreciate the questions, but it's already, this is the problem sometimes
Ready
with
to go.
ongoing stuff, is that the time you're reading it, it's no longer to form.
And then moving forward, prior to any of the contract, it'll come from the attorneys and we'll approve it and then it'll be deemed done instead of going back to the attorneys for approval. We're
Correct.
doing it backwards right now, and we need to switch that in the next future meeting.
Yeah, so technically, we've already approved it pending authorization, so the only,
Right.
the only need for an emergency meeting would be something other than what's already been,
Yeah,
well,
something,
even, it would have to be way off of what's here already.
yeah,
If
I
there's
would-
some major issue that we can't resolve.
Okay.
For example, your contractor says no and walks out, and then we're scheduled.
On the
We aren't gonna use that as an example, though.
Yeah,
verbal or written confirmation from the attorney.
And the question was, is it verbal or written confirmation from the attorney? So
I'm sure Carrie and I agree on this. It'll be there'll be a written record of their confirmation on it. So generally, we communicate via email, but that would suffice. Because I think, there maybe even a place, well, we don't sign off on it, but where at least your attorneys will approve to form on the contract. But I will send my concurrence once it's there via email.
Okay, so
So there's
a chain of documentation. Thank you.
yeah, there's always a record, yeah.
When I sign, that way I know that it's been.
Been vetted by all parties. Okay, smart. Okay, any other questions on that item? Okay. Thank you. Please proceed with the next item.
all right, thank you, Your Honor. Next, I would say final schedule matter was, not the final, but the next to this had been a other matters kind of conversation with regard to the ATP program. And this is just an update to that the tribal council voiced or acted in writing in support of the request to appropriate funds by TCAG to have an ATP plan prepared. That letter was transmitted. There is a RFP that's being drafted. What I can report, I got a verbal update yesterday that draft RFP will be submitted, and there's been as indicated here, there is a team, I would say, that is comprised of Councilmember Santos, Vice Mayor Flores as elected officials to that. I am a part of that, as is Ted Smalley. And then they have their deputy director, and they have an ATP staff person as lead. That will be sent to the team next Tuesday, or by next Tuesday, I would say. This would be just the RFP to go out, which they hope to have out on the street by Friday of next week. And then based on responses to that RFP, there'll be a meeting of that team put together to review the consultants' proposals with a recommendation to the TCAG board at their meeting on December 6th. So this is going to move pretty quick, and because they want to get somebody under contract with approval of the TCAG board on December 6th, and that would be based on the recommendation of the team. And with the hopes of having the plan done, it's believed the call of projects right now for the next ATP cycle is going to be end of May, beginning of June. So the hopes of having a plan prepared and approved, and most importantly, to the approval of the tribal council, have it done so that when the call for projects come, it's going to be late May, early June. So there's a team, as described in there, that will be working first through the RFP process and approving the RFP, then, which will probably be done electronically, but I would anticipate a team meeting to review the proposals and make a recommendation to the TK board for December 6th.
Okay. Any questions on this item? Okay. How about on this side? Any questions?
No, sir.
All right. So with that, let's see, that brings us to scheduling of the next meeting, which I believe in talking about the bylaws, does that mean we're looking at the second Friday,
It was third.
or third Friday of next month? Okay, which was 19th. And that works, and 3 PM is still, okay.
Location.
And that's true. At a prior meeting, we had discussed being able to move between either any sites available here, also at the tribal council chambers, or the site of the relocation meetings potentially, but knowing that we have to notice that, I guess determining the location would be an appropriate thing. Is there any thought of the location of next month's meeting?
I'd like to do one at the, we'll do one here this month and then do one up there next month.
At the
At the tribal chambers.
at the tribal chambers next month? Okay.
November 19th, most of the tribal council will be coming home from Washington DC, possibly.
So December, we would do it in December up there? Is that what you're saying, or?
November or just,
Make the meeting.
Make the meeting.
Make the meeting.
You'll be here, right?
I'll be back, yes.
Okay, I just don't know if I'll be here. But I could be here,
Me and Raylene will be here.
yeah.
okay, so,
The office, the committee members will be here. Okay.
okay.
I think it'll be okay, huh?
So the next meeting will be held at the tribal council chambers on the 19th at 3 PM?
At 3:30?
3 PM. Does that pose any scheduling, just with the travel time? Just want to make sure with the staff participation. Definitely happy to change locations, but just the considerations, and I know, but you're aware, because you make considerations to be here, which we're grateful for.
Let me know, let us know too what we need Zoom or Teams.
And that's what so we are right now streaming this on YouTube. I don't know if anybody's watching or not. But we do, obviously, if that's the interest to do that, to coordinate about, we could use our YouTube channel and I guess so actually, this is the guy that actually does all the stuff. He's the
Guru.
guy behind the curtain that's actually running all this.
Maybe you can just bring your laptop and then we'll plug in and then you can bring it up live.
Yeah, as long as there's an internet connection that we can use, that we can utilize the Zoom along with our streaming service, we should be fine.
Okay, maybe show up an hour early or something.
Yeah, I would probably make some arrangements to check that out.
I've been able to run Zoom from there.
Okay, great.
Do I have to shower? Because the golf course is right there, I can just.
We'll bring some.
Eagle Mountain too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the, we don't need to take action on that, that's just, okay, great. So that takes us to other matters. We'll start with Member Santos.
We had just had the JPA request the city to post environmental study for detention basin.
What was
Just an
that?
update on that, right?
Yeah.
An update on the environmental study for the retention basin?
This,
Y-
Julia,
yeah.
this body can schedule closed session, correct?
Yes, as long as it's, there's anticipated litigation concerning this body directly.
Maybe, it may be, it would definitely be scheduled, but it may be a closed session discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a place that we can have a closed session meeting there that's?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
just, yeah, we'll close chambers.
Okay.
We have a chamber just like you guys do.
Yeah, but I mean, just for,
A separate meeting
Lock
room?
everybody out.
Okay.
you just lock everyone. Okay.
Yeah, we just close the doors and whoever's not in the conversation,
Okay.
they get to wait outside.
Very good. Chairman Garfield, did you have any other matters to discuss?
Yeah, when will the JPA, decide on the runway extension? Let's see, my notes are saying, if so, can we then direct Peters Engineering to initiate the proposed alternate north of West Street? I think that's a question.
So the question's an update on the proposed changes to the runway at the airport. So that'd be an update, I suppose.
Could I recommend I had this conversation with Ted, could I recommend a staff, a staff meeting in preparation of that from a financial standpoint? A lot of moving parts there, so that's a recommendation that Mr. Benedict, if it's okay, Mr. Benedict, city and county staff folks meet with TCAG staff to work through that logistic. If that's comfortable with and an update from that meeting, I guess I would say.
And I
You
think-
mean
sorry, go ahead.
tribe staff, city staff, and TCAG staff?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think that's another one of those items that's really important because we want to have an idea of what's going to be done, opening day too. So,
Yeah, so there's some moving parts
yeah,
on
lots,
that,
definitely.
which is why to have the county staff in there too. So.
Yeah.
I think, and I think as discussed before, the day one list, what's expected and what some things may not be possible.
Mhm.
So what's expected, I think.
Okay. We can look for information on that. Thank you.
I know the chairman, one of his concerns is the tribe being in violation of the MOUs and stuff like that. But specifically in the MOUs, if the tribe and the city and even the county are in discussions mitigating some of the issues, like you just stated that some of them we're not gonna meet. But if we're continually talking about it, then we're all fine, as long as we're in agreement that we're mitigating them. So we should be okay.
So we'll look for pertinent information to maintain the timeline as closely as possible with any considerations for discussion items in the future.
It mainly refers to roads. My concern mainly refers to roads.
Okay, and some of that other staff level conversation will probably, could address some of that as well for an update on these items. Correct? Okay, thank you. Secretary, any other matters?
I think that covers it.
Okay,
I don't have anything.
okay, okay. And I don't either, so I want to thank everybody for attending today and their participation. And Until our next meeting on the 19th of next month at 3 PM at the Tribal Council Chambers, we are adjourned.